broader perspective and then bring it into more like specific like elements. So we're going to take a little walk. The first thing we're going to talk about is where we are, upland watersheds, and then how water systems, rural, upland watershed, off-grid water systems can be integrated into that existing system, and then moving on to the more practical, applicable components of it. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, so I brought lots of stuff. I probably won't get through it all. I'll hit the main things as we flow. But everyone's familiar with this? A shovel? Anybody familiar with this? This is McLeod. This never leaves my truck. I love this tool. These two tools, along with this is where water conservation starts for me in upland watersheds on rural off-grid systems. Because the water is related to the environment. And how we manage the environment directly relates to the availability, the resiliency, the sustainability of the water for our domestic or agricultural purposes. So if you're off a spring or you're off a surface water diversion, which are very variable seasonally, they're variable year to year, or if you're on a well, which in uplifted upland watersheds is an unconfined aquifer, so it's variable as well. Your water system needs to be working in conjunction with the environment. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how techy your drip systems are and your timers and your soils and all of that. It's like it all starts with the forest. So I just wanted to point out very simple tools that everybody's familiar with. And this is where I start with water resiliency, essentially, in upland watersheds. Cool?
Is that a machete?
No, it's a handsaw.
Oh.
Yeah. And when we get up there, I'll explain more of how I utilize these. But the McLeod and the shovel are for moving water around, right? Especially our roads, inboard ditches, stuff like that. Or even just the highest, like headwall ephemeral streams, how water's feeding through those systems, how we can get it into where it belongs if it's gone elsewhere, right? And these are for managing the forest. So managing the soil and then managing the forest. These two tools enable me to manage the forest. And these are the two tools I use for girdling trees. And the trees I speak specifically of fir.
What's girdle?
Yeah. Fir trees.
Take them out.
Exactly. Fir trees are taking over oak woodlands at an astonishing rate. They are overstocked in most of our ecosystems because of our land management, which was forestry, and then it was left. No management is a type of management. So what happens is you have overstocked forests, too many of the same thing tapping into the same water system. So girdling versus going in and cutting it down with a chainsaw. When you cut down a tree with a chainsaw, now you have all of this material that you have to do something with because it's impacting everywhere that it fell. Versus girdling, which is mimicking how trees naturally die in the forest, whether it be age or disease. And girdling is you come in with your saw and you cut a ring around the tree into the cambium layer, which is where all the vascular system is. And then about 18 inches up, you cut another ring around. And then you take your axe and you chop and you peel all that bark away.
Basically being a beaver.
Basically being a beaver. So now that tree can no longer get water up to the top. So now the tree dies, but it dries slowly. Mm-hmm. First the leaves and the needles fall, then the smaller branches, then the bigger branches. Then it becomes a snag. Things move in to decompose it. Then the woodpeckers come in. And over time it slowly falls apart and returns that carbon to the soil.
Do firs use more water than oaks?
Cumulatively, yes. They love it. And they love to tap into areas that are already moist. And then they spread out from there through the mycelium, spreading and spreading, draining and draining and draining. Yes. So, I just want you to understand where I'm coming from when we're talking about water. Like, drip, hoses, meters, that's at the end of the list for me. We got to start with the other broader, wider aspect of this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Then let's take a walk up towards the spring.
It's about 5 to 10 minutes.
But not into the PO.
There's a lot of poison oak as we get closer, so we'll stop outside of that.
La vida salvaje tampoco viene porque no hay nada que comer, porque quieren comer de la diversidad. Pero si estos árboles crecen tan alto y todos los demás mueren, entonces no hay comida.
And why would that matter? Well, we're inserting something like agriculture into these environments, and agriculture has relationships with wildlife, mostly so now because of monoculture with pests. Well, there's no animal diversity to be taking care of the pests that are already present, and it's some sort of balance. Birds, beneficial insects. So whether we're talking about pests in your garden or water conservation in your garden, it all starts out here. And until we have this bigger, wider view, we're constantly going to be battling resources.
Claro, porque el problema es cuando entra la agricultura, ¿verdad? Porque cortan todo y hay un solo cultivo, y ese cultivo entonces viene una peste y la peste pues empieza ahí, pero no hay manera de matar la peste porque no hay diversidad.
No hay que se la lleve.
Claro, porque se eliminó la biodiversidad que traía otros insectos y pájaros, entonces como no hay, y se produce, claro, este problema de imbalance, de desequilibrio en la tierra.
And at some point, that means we have to spend more money.
Y eso
We
significa
ran out
que
of
hay que
water.
gastar.
The truck has to come and deliver water. There's more pests in my garden. I have to spray more. I have to spend more time management in my garden. All of it is directly related to the environment in which we're in. So up here, a spring, right? All of these things have to go into play. I love that it's higher in elevation. So now we're
Genial que
working
está
with
bien
gravity.
agüita, ¿no? Porque hay gravedad para que baje la agüita.
The more we have to engineer our systems, the more complicated they become, the more maintenance they require, and the more chances for the systems failing and less efficient. So gravity is the way to go. Not everybody has that luxury. The other side of like the water is here, it's just everywhere, right? Let's put more holes in the ground and extract more of it, and let's grow things that aren't bioregionally appropriate and very intensive in water, like alfalfa. Like the amount of water that alfalfa needs is insane. And at some point, that system where you're talking about at the bottom, you're now talking about a confined aquifer, and that water is ancient. So the time it takes to get that water back into that confined aquifer is going to take forever. So you're constantly drawing from your savings account, essentially, and never putting anything back in. That's the Central Valley, and that's why the earth is dropping. So we have to be careful in those realms. So it's less of a forest management issue, it's more of a water use issue. Because of recharge rates.
Yeah. And of course, like ag land and valley floor, it's flat. It's easier to...
¿Entiendes lo que está hablando el valle? Claro, y como el agua está ahí mismo ya al tiro, la sacan, pero no tiene manera de volver, porque es agua que es de la anciana de ahí, que nunca nadie la había sacado. Y por eso que dicen que, está diciendo él, que en el valle se está colapsando la tierra se está cayendo.
Como 20 pies en algunos lugares.
Claro, porque el agua que había abajo, que la sostenía, ya se usó y no puede entrar de vuelta porque había estado ahí por milenios.
Era like a if you were going to girdle, like from right here, if we could pick how many,
Okay,
what
good
density
question. I always think about what trees do I want to release.
Release or maintain?
So
release, give them space.
Yes.
Okay.
So I look back here and I look for mature. I look for like these epicenters. Look at the size of that big old hardwood sitting back in here. Multi-branch trunk. That's like a mother.
The oak or?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
I want to go back and I want to release that oak. So what do I have to do for things no longer to compete for light? You can see how these firs go straight up and they're entangled. If I come in here with a chainsaw, it's stuck in the crown. It's a nightmare situation. If I girdle it, over time, it just falls apart, puts carbon back into the soil for the tree I'm trying to release.
So much less work to
Oh
girdle
my
than
gosh.
to like chop, lay down, haul out, or burn piles, all of that.
From when you girdle it to when it starts to create space for the tree you're trying to release, like is that like 3 years, 5 years? Obviously, it's variable.
It's
but-
variable, yep, and it depends. Number one, you got to make sure you girdled it. all the way through. Because if you leave any piece of that cambium, it reconnects and it builds right on it, and it doesn't work. So you really got to get down into the cambium.
Can we girdle today? Can we do one?
No, we're gonna do other things. But I love your idea.
So if you see where you were going to start the bottom of it and where the top of one, where would you do, like, if we were to use this tree as an example?
As an
Qué buena la
example,
manera de
I
hacer
start off at hip high,
Uh-huh.
and so this is a much bigger tree. I'm going to be girdling like 3 feet.
Un metro,
Smaller
¿verdad?
trees, like these little guys in here, 16, 18 inches is not a problem. And this has a massive vascular system. And this is probably a tree that I'm not going to girdle because it's so mature. I'm going to girdle all the other little ones around.
Would you girdle that one?
Yes.
But you would start at hip height. That would be where you
On
start,
bigger
and
ones,
then you go up.
Yep.
On a smaller one, would you start
De la,
below
de
hip
la
height?
cadera para
Yes.
arriba.
Yep.
Eso es un corte dependiendo del
And you
tamaño.
should start with the smaller stuff. This one's very well established, and it's already tapped in, and it's already done the majority of its growth, so its water demand isn't as high as 5 small ones. Yes, they are competing too. This one no longer has to compete, so it's slowing its growth.
That makes total sense.
And it's safer, and it's more of a cumulative than just one. I'd rather do 5 smalls than one.
Dice,
I
mejor
like
hacer
kind of
5 pequeños.
reframing of it versus like getting rid of something to like what am I trying to embrace, like just obviously like a very different approach to trying to get to the same goal. But
Is there a density of like action kind of ratio to be considered? If you use this type of density of trees right here?
Yeah, so I would
Or
come
like
in.
a pace, like how many per year?
Yeah, I would come in here and just from what I'm seeing, I would do everything that's less than 10-inch diameter. And that would be, you could do that in a winter. And if that is my spring source, I'm doing everything around it and everything upslope of it. And that's not very much. 1 person, 2 people, it's a pretty simple process. When you do it is really important. Right now. The sap is running, right? Yeah. Depends, like, it's variable, right? The trees get those indicators by photoperiod and by temperature. But right now, it's like spring is on. They are starting to pump. So what happens is that layer of that cambium is now opening. It's like soft shell crab. It's going to molt. And that tree is like, I need to open it because I need to build it. And now when you get in and cut that, you know you're getting into the void.
Let's do a girdling workshop.
Yeah, do
brilliant
it.
idea.
Okay, let's go.
We can come to yours too,
No, es en la época.
Everybody with their tools? All the work. Like in hazmat gear for poison oak?
I mean, our garden, we don't have hoops, but our wind, Chantal, you know direction. I guess it's going west is this way. It, like at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it just, and I mean, it's really working wise, it's great because we have like a breeze in the middle of the summertime. It's great. Every single plant goes like this. Our pond that we use it's an on-stream pond that we use and we pump up to a tank that then gravity feeds down. So if I was to try to create cooler wind, create a little bit more of an environment, it's pretty much just open from garden fence down to pond. Planting some trees in that kind of open area there would then kind of break it. You get 15 feet of wind disturbance for every vertical foot you come up. So you don't need 60-foot trees to be blocking the wind. Any of it starts to get that air to move up. And when it's moving across flat exposed surfaces, it's just picking up all that heat. And it's transferring on hot air. And then with that help, so our pond is here, and we have Rose Creek. Rose Creek cuts through our property, and it's like when we take our...
It's a canyon.
Yeah, or like when we cross the creek to get to our house or go to and from the garden, it is multiple degrees, multiple degrees cooler in that little valley. So by having that, and then as the wind is blowing, it's catching some of that by having the break here, then it's like multiple stages of cooling. And putting shade on the southern side of your pond to keep your pond cooler so you have better water quality, right? Plants don't like water that's 110 and anaerobic. Interesting. Cool.
So, and then you stack your functions. Now I have this hedgerow, so now I don't have that hot, dry wind coming through, breaking my plants and desiccating my soil. And the type of plants you use are now attracting pest predators. And it's right next to your ag space, and they're like, oh, there's something to eat here.
And that's what it is.
Boom. Take care of it. Or you're growing a fedge, right? It's producing fruit for the birds, right? Now they have plenty of stuff to eat. Now they're not messing with your cover crop seed or the berries that you want to eat. You know what I mean? You stack all these layers. Diversify.
Cool.
Yep. All right. Cool. All right, swing back around. Out back, you put a little manifold that has 4 valves off the one spigot, right? Because my blueberries don't need as much water as my whatever does, right? And so you can just easily modify the use instead of it just being universal. And now you're overwatering, underwatering, whatever it may be. So modular systems are really important, but there's the balance. Don't over-engineer it, because now it needs more maintenance and it could fail, right? This is too much. Or you spend all this money on something, right, just to get whatever, another square foot of space or whatever it may translate into, another plant. So don't over-engineer it, especially water systems. Like, water is flowing down this hill right now passively, right? It's just doing its thing. How can we develop irrigation systems that are passive like that? I just turn on the valve and the water is moving through and it's going into the system and it's targeted to where it's being distributed, and then I can just close down the flow. Like, if we need to capture more water, the house is up the hill. Again, the house could be a source of water for rainwater catchment. How does that water move down passively? Like, it's not, oh, it's raining, I have to go do something. It's like, no, it's raining, and it's going down my gutter, into my downspout, into my tank, and my tank is full, and now it's overflowing, and that overflow is going to my pond, or it's going into the forest, or it's going into an infiltration site where I have a whole bunch of orchard trees or whatever. Like, just passive, just let it do its thing. So all of the systems should be as passive as possible. That makes sense? And this is going to be extremely unique to your situation. There's no like design manual on this kind of thing, other than plan in advance, do the design, do the layout, engineer it, and then reverse engineer it, because you probably over engineered it, right? Because I saw that thing, I would love to incorporate that. It's like, if you don't have to use electrical, power or even batteries, even better, right? Just a couple of valves to let the system roll. Cool? All right. And not only that, it takes up real estate. You have to have storage, because it rains in the winter and you grow in the summer. So you got to do the math on it. There is plenty of water in terms of catching it. It's just how much water do you need in terms of your use, and does that make economic sense? Because things that make economic sense should also make ecological sense, and vice versa. All right, so I love rainwater catchment, but I'm not here to preach everyone needs rainwater catchment. It needs to make sense for you. All right. So then I already explained how all these systems should be passive. This is an example of a passive rainwater catchment system. If you can imagine, here's the gutter, right? The eave of your house or your shed or whatever, your garage, right? Coming back to the wall. So it then comes down this line, comes over, and then comes up to then spill into the tank. Water always finds level. Instead of, let's say, here's the roof, and that's where the tanks are. We are not going to run 45 feet of pipe overhead. It's heavy, it's dangerous, it's going to break. Or the infrastructure you have to build to support that pipe is ridiculous. So wet conveyance would make more sense. We're catching it off the roof, and we're across the ground and under the road and then into the tank, because water always finds level. It doesn't have to be higher and go lower overhead. Because as this horizontal pipe fills with water, it's coming back up each vertical pipe at the same degree, because water is level. At some point, it's going to spill into the tank.
And it's feeding the tank from the top.
Wherever. So you just have to make sure where you're getting your water from is higher in relation to the tank
Okay.
by 1 inch. Like, we're not talking feet. Like, as long as it is this much, the tank is this much lower than where I'm getting it, it will go through the system.
Its way there.
Correct.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
So that's how you don't have to have the tank at the greenhouse or at the house. It could be somewhere else. All right? The other thing we just did was not only do we have safe distribution of water, right? We also just created a built-in filtration system, because any of the sediment that was in that water off the roof is being trapped down in this horizontal pipe. Because as that water lifts, that stuff falls out of suspension.
So you wouldn't want to trench the pipe. You want to be able to have it act like, so that you don't have a pipe, you would want to keep the pipe above ground. You
It
wouldn't want
depends.
to,
I would not keep the pipe above ground here because it seems like there's a lot of flow through here. People are going to trip. I need to get a wheelbarrow through. It depends. If it's a site where it's like it just goes through the bushes, then yeah, just leave it on the surface. It doesn't matter.
So you're thinking be able to access the clean out.
yes, that's what I'm
sediment,
thinking.
yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
like
So,
and that's what.
yes. So we just created a filter, and what this filter is doing is it's capturing the debris and sediment from the first flush, the first rain event. It could be in the fall, or, you know, sometimes like in December, we're like, wow, it's been beautiful sunny days for 3 weeks. The next rain is a first flush because stuff accumulated in the gutters again. So we have to have the ability to drain it. So this drain should be at the lowest point. So if I'm going from these greenhouses to those tanks over there, my clean out is going to be at that end, at the lowest point, so I can clean this pipe.
Sure.
Now think about it. This pipe is going to be 10 foot tall on this side and 8 foot tall on that side. All of the water stored in this vertical pipe is going to blast out any of the sediment out of the pipe. So this would be your first flush mechanism on a wet conveyance, because there's always water in this pipe. If it's overhead, that's dry conveyance. If it's not raining, there's no water in it. Don't do dry. Do wet, built-in filtration. Does that make sense? Cool. The other thing I incorporated in my design is right here. This is a backflow prevention. So if I'm running 45 feet to those pipes, I'm going to get friction loss. So the water could be entering the system from the roof at a faster rate that it's spilling into the tank. So to prevent it from coming back up into the gutters or just spilling all over the place, it can come across here and spill out just like the classic downspout
gutter,
would be
yeah.
doing. So that being said, this line right here has to be higher than down there. So it's got to spill into that tank before it gets this much higher and backfills through here. So there's a few little tweaks to that if you're going a distance, but you can go a distance. It's all good.
Like, what's the distance?
60 feet is a good distance. Yeah, at 2 inch. When you start going farther or you have a larger surface catchment area, you should go up to like 3 inch on your pipe diameter. Yep. That's rainwater catch. Like, so it's raining, it's working. I have to do one thing, and that's empty my first flush after the first flush. And then put the cap back on, and you're done. Because over at the tank, when the tank fills, it overflows. Where does that water go to? Oh, it could go into the pond. Oh, it can go to the forest area. Or it could go into a series of tanks. Doesn't matter. So the redundancy within the systems is really important too. So you have one point of maintenance. Your other maintenance is taking care of the roof and the gutters and making sure that system's clean as well. But now you're storing clean water. You're storing clean water that could be used in all aspects of, you know, agriculture or even domestic. You filter out the biologics that are in it. The cool thing about tanks is they'll set up a biolayer on the bottom, whereas anaerobic and aerobic bacteria kind of duke it out, and then they set this layer. And anything that enters, like bird poop, is then processed by the anaerobic and aerobic layers and trapped in the bottom. So essentially all the water above that layer is clean water. So you have a good source of clean water. So now when you use that for ag, it's not plugging your filter. I mean, it's not plugging your drip emitters. It's already been filtered once, twice, and if you do good maintenance, 3 times.
So is that, this is going to sound like be probably a really dumb question. taking that into what you're saying, that the sludge layer, is that part of the reasons why that outlet, the bottom of a tank outlet, is so that you are above the sludge line?
Yes. Now you don't want, like I've seen, because there's no filtration system from a spring or a surface water diversion, and you've got sediment filled to the bottom of the bulkhead. Now you just added maintenance. You know, like you gotta drain it. You gotta go in there with a 5-gallon bucket and hand that thing out to someone,
Sucks.
or use an insane amount of water to flush it. Yeah. So if you can passively filter it twice and then it's clean water, and that bio layer that's in there, you will never have to clean out because it doesn't get to the bulkhead. It's just a nice thin little layer on the bottom, and that's really important and healthy for the storing of the water, because you're storing it 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. Maybe that's the last water you use. It could be in there for 9 months. I have a tank at home that's our emergency reserve tank. It's 850 gallons. The water that's been in there from Rainwater Catchment, we installed that tank in 2010. I've never cleaned it out. And every year I go and check it. I take the top off and I look in and I can see the bottom, and there's no foul smell whatsoever. Water is perfectly clean.
And it's the same water. It hasn't
Same water.
circulated itself
Oh,
out.
it's almost 15 years.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about the water hanging out in that bottom in the wet conveyance, but I was given that information. I guess it's a non-issue.
Gotta dump it. Yeah. This will get nasty.
Oh, it will in the wet conveyance.
Yes, because it doesn't have enough surface to set up the biolayer.
I see.
And it's constantly being moved. Yeah.
So if
that's
it's
what
hanging
you
out
gotta.
for 8 months, you want to flush that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And then, depending, you could leave this open, but if you leave this open, then you got things crawling in there.
Yeah.
So, I open it. I do a last drain, late spring, early summer, whenever that is, and then I put my plug back on. Unless I'm in an area where any summer rains I get, I want to discharge into a little rain garden or something like that, and I don't need to plug it to store it. So it all depends. All right. So I just want to go over this in person. It's all in the manual.
That made rain catchment seem completely not nearly as intimidating as it always
Cool.
seems in my brain. It's like, oh, yeah, that's like...
Yeah, and people that say that the water gets full and you know the odor and it's not good, and
Great.
because I talk to people on the coast, you know, a lot of people are buying water.
Yeah.
I said, you have a huge roof,
Yeah.
and the rationale is that actually the water is not good quality and it's going to be dirty and da 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 da.
Yeah. And you know,
And they buy, so you know, so it's like
they buy treated water with a bunch of chemicals in it.
That's right.
Yeah.
and they cannot drink, and
Right.
that I don't want to take a shower in their house.
Yeah. You know, so the other question I get is like, whoa, I thought this was illegal. It's like, well, Governor Brown in 2013 passed the Rainwater Catchment Act,
Right.
which took water on your impervious surfaces from being waters of the state, like everything that goes to the creek, to private property.
Oh, really?
Yes. So every drop on every roof on this entire property is your water. You can do whatever you want with it. You can sell it if you want. You could give it away.
You suddenly have a car park.
Yeah.
So we don't need a water right for. Oh my! What have I been doing?
So,
Change your business. You're going to reinvent yourself now.
and I thank water rights for this fact, because 2013 that happened, I'm like, yes, finally, let's do this. This is our water. And everyone's like, man, I don't buy all this storage. What are you talking about? And then as soon as the state stepped in and they're like, forbearance period, I'm like, everyone
Now-
needs tanks anyways.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, catch it and store it, and now you don't have to do reporting. Now you don't have to pay SIUR and SDU fees and reporting, and just get out of here. I am exempt because I'm working with nature systems, and you got nothing on me. So when forbearance periods came in, the playing field got leveled in those terms. Like, we all need storage. Now it's like, well, where's your water coming from? And do you want to do those other things or not? And that goes with not just tanks, but ponds that are deemed rainwater catchment, right? How can we make sure those ponds fill? Because the other thing about rainwater is it's variable, right? Oh, it's dry, it hasn't rained yet, my tanks aren't full. What does that mean, right? Well, you start looking at, well, how many roofs do I have? Storage is not the answer. The answer is, how much water do I actually need? How much water am I using? What things can I do to make the water that I have more efficient so I don't need a tank farm? So I don't need a 3-acre pond, I only need a half an acre foot pond, right? Because that costs money, that costs maintenance, that's occupation of space, especially if you have a small lot, you know, you're like, if you start thinking about it, 9 foot in diameter, 2,500 gallon tank, right? And you're on 1/8 of an acre, you're losing real estate quickly. So how can you do other things? How am I growing? What am I growing? How am I irrigating? And what am I doing with water in the winter? Am I just letting it run away? Or am I infiltrating it into the ground? Because this is free. This earth is the best storage place. It stores water for forests for billions of years. Like, we can look at it in terms of our agricultural spaces as well. Especially if you're full sun outdoor in the ground. Like, how are you getting water into the ground and keeping it there so that how much storage you need and when you go to storage is much, much later in the season. You're not using stored water in May, or maybe even in June. You're like, yeah, 4th of July, we're running tanks kind of thing. For all these other things that you do to set you up for that.
No till for sure.
Gotta pencil out. Otherwise, we got no margin.
You no till
All right.
I'm looking.
2 more
I just
things.
had cataract surgery, and so I haven't been able to see all the way.
I'm glad you said that about rainwater catchment and it not being this big old crazy thing. This is all the tools I need to install a rainwater catchment system. This is it. There's no power tools. Like, this is all I need. This is my magic wand. We all know what this is? It's a level. Okay? Anybody see anything different or unique about
Your little
mine?
1-inch drop there. Yeah.
What percent slope does that give me?
So high
Yes.
tech.
2%. 1/4 inch per foot. That's all you need for water to move. 2% slope. We don't need systems like this. We need systems like this. So I put a 1-inch block on the end, and when I put this on a pipe or I put this on a road, when this hits level, I know I'm at a 2% slope. Water will move in whatever direction I want the water to move. Okay? Outside of that, pipe cutters, right? So we're not making microplastic nightmares all over the place. They come in various sizes. But sometimes pipe won't fit in that, so I prefer a fine-tooth carpentry saw, not a hacksaw. Use a hacksaw and that blade's like migrating you all over the place. So I use this nice big flat blade and I do it over a tote. So I'm capturing all my little microplastics if I have to use this guy. Outside of that, tape measure, some glue, other fittings. The only reason why I have these in my box is to get this cap off. When you're dealing with plastic and metal don't work together. If you start cinching plastic down with metal, it's going to break. So that's the only reason why I use that. All right, I'm going to give you a little trade secret. Maybe you already know it. I thought I had a 2-inch bulkhead. I don't know where it went. Familiar with bulkheads? This is the way we put a hole in a tank, right? And then we can have some way of attaching things to it. Bulkheads are really cool. They're reverse threaded. That way when you tighten things on here, it doesn't loosen your fitting. They have a rubber gasket. So there's the rubber gasket there, then a hard washer, and then the nut. So depending on your application, where the water is, right, the rubber gasket goes where the water is. So this would go on the inside of the tank, and then I can feed the nut onto there. Again, I don't use the channel locks on this. It's all hand tightened. This is a rubber gasket. The harder I tighten this, the rubber starts to get smushed, and then at some point it starts to crimple. And now it's going to leak because I over tightened it. So you should only be tightening these by hand. Now, we need to put a hole in the tank because these come with one bulkhead at the top. So these tanks are designed to be filled. But I'm like, well, I have surplus. It's going to overflow. And I want a passive system. I don't want to be like, is it full? Okay, turn it off. I want it to just fill and overflow. So I got to put another bulkhead on the tank so it overflows into that area. When you drill a hole in that plastic tank, you're going to go clockwise, and then you're going to switch your drill to reverse, because our drills don't spin fast enough for these threads to make a clean cut, and it starts to bounce around. So if you go in reverse, you get a much cleaner cut on the drill bit, so that you could then insert your bulkhead, because you want a clean cut, because you want this to form a nice clean seal. Okay, unless you want to invest hundreds and hundreds of dollars in a tank drill, which is basically it's based on heat and it melts a hole through there. But you know, $7 versus hundreds of dollars to put one bulkhead.
So you get it to its teeth to grab just a little bit, and then you flip it.
You go forward only to get your pilot bit in.
Oh, and then
now you
just
go in
flip it
reverse.
into reverse.
And you got to give a little more pressure. Yep.
Uh-huh.
And so I have someone inside holding a cardboard box, and then I'm outside holding a cardboard box, trying to manage the microplastic. So that's just a little trick. So before you go drilling holes for bulkheads, do that. All right. From time to time, I offer rainwater catchment workshops where someone wants a system, and I'm like, can we do a workshop? And we invite everybody over, so as we're putting the system together. So we can always do that in the future. That's cool. But everyone gets the manual. Hopefully it's got all the steps you need in it.
Is that what that's what you
Right.
sent out, right?
Mm-hmm.
The last thing I'll say on rainwater catchment is the types of fittings. Can you see the difference? They're both 90-degree angles, or L's, but they're very different. This is a hard 90. This is used for pressurized systems. This is for drain waste or vents in the plumbing language, and it's got a nice sweeping swoop on it. I prefer these over these because now the water is flowing through here very smoothly and nothing's going to get stuck. So I prefer to use the drain waste vent than the hard angles, which are pressurized. These are also less expensive than these. The thing about it is there's no rainwater catchment plumbing store. So you kind of got to go with what plumbing already has out there. So you kind of got to get creative with the things you're putting together to make something like this.
Does it make a difference if something's, is it better, or does it make a difference if something is not threaded versus unthreaded? And it's all
Yes, it does, because if it's glued, you better make sure that your measurements and your placement and your design is like dialed in. Otherwise, this has to get cut off, trashed, and you have to put a new one on. Yep. So it is. And that's why at the distribution end, so at the bottom of the tank, I exclusively go threaded. Because invariably these valves break. And now I can just unscrew the valve once the tank's empty, because it's the end of the season, and I can screw a new one on.
Is there a difference between a plastic valve? Is there an issue using plastic versus like a brass valve that doesn't get beaten by the sun as much?
I armor all of these, whether it's from the sun or from the lawnmower or the bear or whatever, so these get armored. They all fail.
Yeah.
How do you armor it?
A box, build like a little wooden box and goes right over the top of it. Yep. Bigger applications, you can drive some T-stakes around it, so it just depends on the scene. But if it's plastic and it's exposed, it needs to have a box. Hopefully you have a space where you're storing your tanks that's more shaded. Then you're just dealing with breakage from something hitting it.
What
But
else
either
about the
way.
brass ones? They blow out a lot and they freeze.
That is a problem. And the other thing is it depends on if you have hard water or not, and it gets calcification, and then you can't even operate it. They all fail. So that's why it's so important for these systems to be as passive as possible. The more moving parts, the more maintenance, the more risk of failure. Yep. The thing I do like about the plastic is as long as I'm protecting it from breakage or from direct sunlight, they're a lot easier to maintain, because what I'll do is if the handle starts to get sticky, I'll unscrew this and then I'll put some drops of olive oil in it. And then I'll get the lube back in, and it's olive oil, so it's okay to go in the water. You know, I'm not using like motor oil or some other kind of lubes. So I can maintain them like that. But they fail, and it's always the handles.
Yeah.
It's always the handles. Yeah. But the whole rainwater catchment system only has one valve, essentially. You can put a valve down here, right? But now you have $3.50, $25 that needs to be replaced to maintain. So it's up to you. You know, sometimes this is nice to just open the valve. If I go and do this and it's a 45-foot run, wear your boots, because that is a cannon, right? As you're untwisting it and it's starting to spray. So it just depends on your maintenance, what you're willing to do. Oh yeah. You guys familiar with these? It's called the Drain King. They come in various diameters. Put a garden hose on the end of this, and the bladder in here inflates and seals the pipe, and then it shoots a jet of water out. So if you were to get an obstruction in your plumbing somewhere because you didn't have filters, you didn't have passive systems, these are great. I've used these.
It doesn't leak unless there's not pressure?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So these are designed for drains. You put it in and you hook up the garden hose and it'll blast. Instead of a snake,
gotcha.
you know, the old snakes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've found these to be way better. They come in all sorts of diameters. From taking care of, in various diameters. Like this one does 4-inch to 6-inch.
Okay.
It'll inflate up to pipe diameters of that size.
There's a little micro hole in the
Drain
end.
King.
Little teeny one. So it builds up and then it's a jet. And what happens is that water hits the plug and it starts to backflow, but it can't get past this. And so it inevitably pushes that out. So simple little maintenance things, right? If you don't have the clean outs and you don't want to run a snake, little things like that. All right, I'm just going to keep showing you cool little things.
Drain King.
It has a ring to it.
The Drain King, yeah. We're going to get back to ag here in a second. I just wanted to keep riffing on other things before we go there. Water isn't just for our gardens. Water can be for domestic purposes, or water can be for livestock as well. So how can we implement water conservation in the livestock, right? So this is a chicken nipple. That's what they're called. Chicken nipples. This is a chicken nipple system. So this is for not wasting water and being more conservative with the chickens, but it also puts water in their natural drinking path. They don't have the peristalsis like we do, so they have to gather water in their mouth, and then you see them do this, try to get the water down their throat. So now if this is elevated at a certain height, now they're naturally drinking already in that position. It's very cute, yes. Anybody have chickens? Have had chickens? Do you use the upside down water chicken thingy majingy?
I used the ones in your other hand. But
Yeah.
it took them forever to figure that out.
Yeah. I found that this is more appropriate for ducks,
Oh,
and this is more for chickens. And the thing about it is the chickens see the little shiny thing and they love to, just like the tips on your shoelaces, my chickens would like pull these things all the time. So they're curious, and the next thing you know, like water just hit their tongue and they're like, oh, that's what it is. Versus this is ducks, because ducks love to do their gurgle thing. Yeah, so
the
these have been
chickens
better.
destroy their little water containers.
Oh, the
I
first
don't
thing
know
to
what they
do, yeah. And now there goes your maintenance, way up, right? Now if you're on a limited amount of water, now you're wasting water. So even down to systems like this, it's really important to think about water conservation.
Do those need a certain amount of pressure to keep them from leaking?
Too much pressure, they will leak.
Too much pressure.
Yeah, these things are rated from basically from 0, depending on the manufacturer, like 0 in the 10 psi range. Yep. Once you get higher than that, it's a stem with a ball bearing in there, and the ball bearing doesn't seat. Like the water just pushes right past it. Yeah. So this is a low pressure system, which is perfect for rainwater, because you hook this up to like a 50-gallon pickle barrel right next to the coop, and you've got 6 months of water for 8 chickens, and you're like, I don't even have to think about water. Like, they are dialed.
There's no poop in their water.
And they're not pooping water. And you're doing other things way more important than changing poop water.
God, they love to poop in that water.
I'm gonna get chickens again.
All right.
Just reminded me of how cool your
So I
chickens
went
were.
over
Remember that book you got me, that consultative book?
the components of the mechanisms to get clean water into your tanks, right? Rainwater, but maybe you're on a spring or surface water diversion. Passive Y filters like this, which don't need very much pressure to get through. So then in here you have a filter cartridge. These come in different micron meshes, so it just depends on how much sediment or what type of sediment is in your system. So putting something like this between your spring head or your surface water diversion at some point in the line, now thinking I don't want to go up the hill to drain my filter, where is it, right? And these are very simple. You open the cap and they self-flush. You can get little hose ends with the little valve, so instead of doing the cap, you just open the valve and it pushes the sediment out. So something as simple as this is going to keep the water much cleaner once it gets into your tank, and you don't have that issue where you get sediment to the bulkhead kind of thing. So now you got clean water, whatever your water's coming from. So once it gets to the end of the line, you're
Ours
decreasing the maintenance.
is, and it was designed the way that it was set up was we inherited it, but we have one of those, but it's much bigger.
Yeah.
Right at the before the manifold that leads to the timers, because the tank
Yes.
is way up there, and I'm the one that always has to take pictures of the meter.
Yeah.
And it just like blows it, and it's like amazing how much grossness is there. Actually.
Yeah.
But being able to have one, so there is a second set of would be nice.
Yeah. So you could put one of these pre-tank, but with larger micron screen, like larger holes, so you're maintaining it less, but it's still getting out quite a bit of the sediment, and then a more higher maintenance one with a smaller micron where you are. Yeah, absolutely. But $8, passive, super simple, saves you lots and lots of time. All right. We'll do these and then we'll do that. Okay. Everyone's familiar with timers?
Yeah.
Okay. I do use timers from time to time. I prefer these. These are analog timers over digital ones. Digital ones always fail on me. Like, even the really expensive ones, I'm like, wow, I just wasted more money. So I've gone back to the analogs, just 2 dials. The thing about this is, though, it's not like the digital where there's a clock and you set the time. This, when you set this, it's whatever time it is. So if I was to set this for 20 minutes in 2 days, then it's right now at 2 whatever p.m. is when it's going to go off. So if you want to water in the morning, you got to get out there in the morning and set your analog timer. But these for me just last much longer. They don't fail. Float valves are so important. This is a mini float valve. This is something I would put in a pickle barrel for chickens kind of thing. Float valves are so important in terms of water conservation, so you don't have tanks overflowing, or the water, instead of it being diverted from somewhere, this has shut the water down because it's full and the water is being bypassed at the point of diversion or whatever it may be. So float valves are really important. Bigger tanks, you're gonna use bigger float valves. They got the big black ball on them, right? And just set it to whatever line, is appropriate to the system. If you have a redundant overflow, that could be used for an emergency, because sometimes the little diaphragm in here gets plugged by sediment. So you should still have a redundant overflow going into an appropriate area, not just spilling out the top of the tank, which I've seen over time because the tank's so far away and no one's maintaining it. It's eating away under the foundation of the tank, and the tank's
Start using.
exactly. So redundancy and everything is so important. All right. So when we're dealing with off-grid rural systems, typically you have lots of poly. From the source to our first primary tank, to our tank bank, to our garden, right? There's this poly everywhere. If you are on a stored water because the spring goes dry, or the creek goes dry, or you're doing a really good job monitoring your use and it needs to match up with your reports, leaks can be a big issue. And the way that I deal with leaks is by pressure gauges. So if I've got a really long run of poly, and there could be a couple of like fittings because I had to repair things with hose clamps, I could have leaks. So the way you can detect the leaks is at the bottom of the line you have a pressure gauge. And it's really easy to do because you can turn off the water, and so you have static pressure. Come back the next day, and if there's less, you have a leak. And the other cool thing is the pressure will tell you where the leak is.
Wow.
Because you get a half a PSI for every foot of elevation. So if you lost half your pressure, you know that leak is halfway up the line. So I don't have to trek all the way along. Where is this leak? Where is this leak? I have a pretty good idea on the section of where the leak is. So these are very valuable if you're dealing with lots and lots of poly, is the pressure line. This is also important because where you put your storage for gravity-fed systems, if you need a certain amount of pressure to water a certain amount of square footage in an efficient way, you need to make sure you have an appropriate amount of pressure. And the reverse could be true. You could have too much pressure, and too much pressure can blow out fittings, and now you're losing water resource. So knowing your pressure is really important. And these are really inexpensive, and you can get these T fittings that are barbed, like this is for 3/4 inch poly, and it just goes in line somewhere. Okay. How are we doing on time? We're doing good. Cool.
No, I'm like,
She wants
you need to come to every property.
Yeah.
Every
Okay.
single one.
Let's do it.
And then go.
I only turned 50, so I got some more time. Okay. We're all familiar with drip systems?
Do you have interns?
Don't.
Yeah. Can I sign up?
I have students though.
I'm down.
I'm gonna pass this around. Are we all familiar with these kinds of drips? Okay, I'm gonna pass it around. Why don't you take a look at them? Oh, I lost the sprinkler.
Sprinkle.
I got more.
Somebody want a trade seat?
Micro soaker.
Are you ready to get out in the sun?
Here,
I am.
screw that on
but
the
I'll
spray hood
rotate.
for me on the top.
My old
No,
lady.
it's fine.
you.
Oh,
No, somebody else can take it.
Your turn.
Take it. Sure. Yeah.